Chapter 13. Secrets in the Palace. Amira wiped the sweat from her forehead and kept smashing the mortar against the pestle. She had been at this for close to 2 hours, much longer than she expected, but she should have known better. The black onyx was much harder to grind than salt. She had hoped to be done by now, but the dress fitting earlier today had taken 2 hours plus the hour to travel there and back and afternoon tea with Vesha afterward. The empress had engaged her in small talk and only brief discussion of the matters of state. All the while, Darrigan had lingered not far off. There hadn't been another word about Santhi or the other Sithraul, though Amira had been certain they were watching. "Are you sure I can't do anything?" the archduke asked, for the 3rd or 4th time in the past half hour. Amira had wanted to make sure that the onyx was hammered down personally, but her hands were sore and Daindrath kept begging to be useful. "Here, just keep grinding it." The archduke accepted the mortar and pestle eagerly, homing in on the task with the focus of a hunting dog on the scent. Amira flexed her fingers and shifted her attention to the blank sheets of parchment fanned out around her. They were cross-legged opposite one another at the bottom of an old stairwell. It led to a portion of the palace under renovation, and hadn't been in regular use for years, according to Daindrath. Amira tended a small fire beneath the smallest cooking pot they had been able to find. The cast-iron pot bubbled with walnut oil over a bed of coals. Out of the corner of Amira's eye, Daindrath's brow furrowed as he concentrated on his task. He didn't shy away from manual work, unusual for a man born into silk swaddling clothes. Amira had met bastard slumlords with 100 times more arrogance. Humility. That was the word. Daindrath was humble. Daindrath wasn't strikingly handsome or tall or renowned in tournaments or any of the other things noblemen were usually praised for. Yet the more time Amira spent in his company, the more enchanting he became. The archduke noticed her staring and looked up, coughing. Amira fumbled for the painting brush Daindrath had procured for her, along with the other things on her list. Dabbing the tip in a small cup of water, she practiced painting the runes she would use, the ones for protection, shielding, driving away, and troubles of the mind. Warding had never been her strong suit, and she couldn't afford to make mistakes now. "The decoration has begun," Daindrath said between strikes of the pestle. Amira glanced up. "Decoration?" "For the betrothal feast," Daindrath elaborated. He pursed his lips for a moment. "The ballrooms and banquet halls have been almost declared sacred. Vesha's steward has servants working all hours to prepare. It seems the expected attendance doubled since your performance on the green." That gave Amira pause. Their nuptials were fast approaching. The betrothal feast would be a month before the wedding, traditionally when any opposition to the marriage could be brought forward, and any final legal matters settled. In truth, it would be more a way for the early guests to start enjoying themselves before the archduke's official wedding. As for the wedding itself, "You're really marrying me?" Amira kept her attention on the outlines of the runes on the floor. "Is that so hard to believe?" Daindrath asked. Amira frowned at the ground. "I don't know." Some part of her still didn't understand, even though Daindrath had made his reasons clear. "Are you sure you want to?" "Yes," Daindrath said, without hesitating. Several long heartbeats passed. "Do you not want to marry me?" It was the first time he had asked, but Amira hadn't expected him to ask at all. He was the Grand Archduke. He could have any woman in the Empire. More than that, he now held her tether as a Khajrahan, even if he had released her from all his previous commands. Amira leaned closer to the water outlines of the runes. What if we find a way to free you of the demon? Wouldn't it be better if you had someone else? Someone like Ponra? Daedrith cleared his throat. Some might say as much. Then why don't you choose one of them? Amira gestured vaguely in the direction of the palace. You were going to. I don't want them. I want you. Amira looked up at that. Her mouth went suddenly dry, and she cleared her throat. I'm bound to you, Daedrith. You don't have to marry me to keep me. You know how a Khajrahan's bond works. Daedrith frowned. I know. Then why? Daedrith shook his head and met her eyes. The first time I saw you, it was through Ka'is. You looked straight at him and didn't back down. There's only a handful of people who have shown that kind of courage. He inhaled. Then the night at your father's banquet. When I realized who you were, I thought to myself I couldn't have asked for a more beautiful executioner. Amira shivered a little at that. She remembered Darrigan's warning, his insistence that killing Daedrith was the best thing she could do for him. Then when you were exposed as the assassin, you begged me for your sister's life. Not yours. Not even a speedy death. You begged mercy for the one person you had the most reason to envy. Amira looked away. If only he knew how much she had and often did envy her sister. Would he find her so admirable then? I would have you at my side, if you're willing. You never asked if I was willing before? Amira let some of her resentment creep into her voice. No, Daedrith admitted. You were my enemy then, and I treated you like it. But I don't want us to be enemies. Amira watched him closely. Would you force me to marry you? She tilted her head to one side. What if I said I didn't want to marry you now? I would try to change your mind. And if you couldn't? Daedrith lowered his attention to the mortar and pestle in front of him. I don't know. One command, Daedrith. One command, and I couldn't refuse. Amira stiffened her spine as she had when she expected a blow from her stepmother. For the sake of your empire? Your bloodline? Wouldn't you do it for the greater good? Daedrith dropped the pestle, and it clanked to the floor. Look, I'm not going to use your curse on you like that. And I don't understand why the curse changes things so much. I could order soldiers to keep you captive just as easily, but you don't seem to care about those. Daedrith closed his eyes, muscles flexing in his cheek. What do you want, Amira? I want to choose without the fear of being forced. I want the curse off. Amira's voice came out soft, almost a whimper. There's a way to break it, but no one knows how. Or no one will tell me. Daedrith's eyes opened at that, and when he looked at her, there was sadness in them. I understand, he said softly, and she realized he did. I swear, if we ever find a way to release you, I will do everything in my power to set you free. She believed him. Even if you left me now. Daedrith said, choking out the words like they had barbs that caught in his throat. No one should have to live with curses like ours. The assassin turned away and inhaled several long, shuddering breaths. Her eyes stung and she clenched them shut, fighting the tears. Both of them had been shackled by their curses, bound and bent in different ways. As long as a Kadrahan's vows bound Amira, how could she be anything more than Daindrath's prisoner? How could she be his equal, if there would always be her curse, ready to make her bow at a word? And once our curses are gone? For a moment, she pretended that it was a question of when, not if. For a moment, she pretended that they even stood a chance of prying these chains off. Then we learn how to be free together, Daindrath said softly. If you'll have me. Amira almost laughed. You'll tire of me the moment you don't need me. Daindrath stared at her, barely even blinking. I look forward to proving you wrong. Amira hadn't expected that. This man had no right to unsettle and disarm her like this. She felt like she had been caught without armor or a weapon, naked in front of him as she hadn't ever been with anyone else. Will you marry me? Amira frowned. The wedding is in little more than a month. Yes, but you don't have to. If you don't want to. Amira's heart pattered just a little faster, and she leaned over the archduke, inspecting his work with the mortar and pestle. I think that's as good as it's going to get. Amira. She took the mortar and held it over the cauldron, spooning in the mixture with an iron ladle she had been using thus far. The walnut oil simmered as the powder floated in and sank below the surface. Amira ladled out the extra oil, flicking it on the nearby stone until there was only enough to cover the top of the powder. Ever so carefully, she fed Ka into the grainy mixture, pulling from the air around them a little at a time. It wasn't like when she had to draw the strength for a full spell or an offensive attack, where it had to be built up to bursting. This way, it was more like releasing a breath. The archduke leaned over to watch her with his hands splayed on the floor. Amira fed Ka into the potion until it glowed a dull green, barely bright enough to be noticed. Then she traced invisible symbols over the bubbling potion, brow furrowed in concentration. Where are we supposed to be again? Amira had forgotten the clever lie they'd given to the guards and servants. Even for an archduke who would soon wear the crown, it was surprisingly difficult to escape his minders. Amira took a little comfort in knowing that any other assassins would have to go through a gauntlet of guards and witnesses to even get near the archduke. Art gallery on the 3rd level, Daindrath replied. Badred's covering for us. Amira tapped the ladle on the side of the cauldron. That needs to sit overnight. She'd hoped it would take less time, but she'd underestimated the ingredients. The two of them observed the bubbling cauldron for a moment. Daindrath watched with no visible emotion. Did he have even a little faith that this would work? Amira watched a particularly large bubble pop. Aside from taking this long, it's going as I had hoped. The archduke rose, stretching with a regal grace befitting his birthright. He tilted his head to one side, then the other, loosening his neck. Is there anything else we can do? Amira frowned contemplatively. No. Not until morning. She'd fed enough power into the potion for now. All that remained was to wait. She doused the fire beneath the pot. It wouldn't do to burn the place down. We still have a few hours then. Can you come with me? Daindrath asked. Another carefully worded question. It impressed her how well he avoided commands. She accepted his extended hand and let him help her to her feet. His hand was warm and firm around hers. She could get used to holding it. The pungent scent of the simmering potion followed them back up the winding staircase and out of the tower. Amira wrinkled her nose. Hopefully no one would notice. Daintrith led the way back into a palace corridor, casting a surreptitious glance around the empty hall before motioning her onward. Though this passage was rarely cleaned and even more rarely used, he didn't let his guard down. Wise of him. Amira kept her hands loose at her sides, trailing the archduke. They continued in silence, emerging at the ground level of the palace, the servants' level. Amira heard the staccato clicks of a woman's shoes from somewhere down the hall. Daintrith steered clear of the footsteps and turned into a narrow passage. Amira briefly caught the clatter and clank of the kitchens, hard at work on lunch and supper already, even as the servants cleared the debris of breakfast. Amira and Daintrith came to a darker, more austere portion of the palace. The odors of sweat, metal, and oiled leather mixed the air. Amira would know that mix anywhere. The low snores and jangle of iron from the other side of the walls indicated they were in the barracks of the palace guard, or close to it. Daintrith navigated the palace easily, as if he had a map inked on his palm. Amira supposed this was the place he had grown up. Had he and Thaddred explored it as children? She smiled at the thought of them both as ruddy-faced boys escaping their governesses to go on adventures. Here we are. The archduke stopped before a narrow wooden door bolted with iron brackets. In the dim light of the passage, Amira heard him rattle the latch a moment before it swung open. She squinted against the sudden sunlight, then stepped out after him into a courtyard. The ground level was paved flat and rimmed on all sides by a covered walkway. In the center, white lines marked off squares and circles. At the opposite end of the courtyard, the doors to an armory stood wide open. Amira spotted racks of rapiers, javelins, halberds, and several other weapons she couldn't identify from a distance. Some were wooden, others were very much steel. "What is this place?" the assassin asked, though she had already guessed the answer. "The practice yards," Daintrith replied. "This is where the imperial knights and squires like to train. The empress comes to watch them from time to time." Amira glanced up to a canopied balcony protruding from above. An empty throne, somehow imposing despite its humble wooden design, loomed overhead. The assassin could imagine Vesha on that throne, the empress's sharp gaze judging, weighing. "Can you come?" Daintrith beckoned, glancing over his shoulder. He headed off in the direction of the weapons room, hardly breaking stride. "This close to noon, they'll be resting or working indoors. We have a little time before they return for the evening practice." Amira followed him and stopped at the entrance. She waited as he perused the racks of weapons, wandering to the far side of the room where all she could see of him was a narrow shock of tawny hair. Leaving her unattended in a room full of weapons, Daintrith certainly didn't trust in halves. The archduke picked up the weapons in turn, considered a few of them for a moment, then replaced them on the rack. He eventually selected 2 light rapiers. He grinned as he tossed one toward her. "I believe you know what to do with this." Amira caught the weapon. "I could gut you with this," she said, pointing it at him. "I could. Don't think you're safe because I'm in a dress." Daintrith's grin widened, and his eyes sparked devilishly. "I wouldn't dare." Amira fought the urge to smile back, biting her lower lip. "I thought you might like to spar." He made a few quick strokes with the blade, his dull rapier swishing through the air. "I can't imagine you want to lose your skills." It was the truth. The last thing Amira wanted was her hard-earned muscles to grow weak, but she looked away. I appreciate your concern.
Is something wrong?
No, it's just... She hesitated. I'm not under compulsion anymore. I could hurt you. Kill you, even.
They're not sharp.
I can be a creative killer. Amira spat the words. A memory floated up from the back of her mind. A smuggler she'd killed by driving a spoon into his eye. It had been one of her earlier jobs, and messier than those she'd carried out as a mature assassin. The archduke shook his head.
I'm not helpless, Amira. I held my own well enough the night we met.
But it wasn't you, was it? Amira's voice turned soft, and it sounded sad to her ears. Ka'is was defending his host. Dangerous' face tightened a little, but if her words stung, he didn't let offense show.
Yes, but I'm still not helpless. War is one of the arts an archduke is expected to learn.
Amira decided not to respond to that. She had no doubts he had received the finest instruction from the finest weapons masters. Yet she doubted even that would help him against her, trained in the arts of death for as long as she could remember. Beaten down and broken until even her heart had sharp edges. If she really wanted to, she knew she wouldn't need that knife Darrigan had given her to kill him, especially without the compulsions. Fine, was all she said. Amira adjusted her grip and lunged. The archduke had to retreat to avoid being struck. Even the dull practice blades could leave nasty welts. He recovered, skirting toward the center of the courtyard, weapon held at the ready. The archduke blocked and countered her next swing in a maneuver she recognized as the layman's parry from the Imperial Military College's dueling manual.
You forgot to say on guard.
Amira shook her head. Real enemies won't give you the courtesy.
Is that how you were taught?
There was a hint of teasing in Dangerous' voice.
Bashing at each other in the training ring in a free-for-all.
Not far from the truth, actually. She circled him, studying his weight, balance, sword grip, and footwork. When the demon had fought her on that first night, it had been a bare-knuckle match to the death. This was more refined, nuanced. Dangerous almost surprised her when he attacked, but she noticed his muscles flex and his weight shift. She swung her sword up to meet his strike, pushing his blade aside, and quickly followed up with a return strike for his knee. She expected him to block. Instead, he lunged, thrusting his blade at Amira's chest. Amira blocked with her rapier and skirted to the right. Like a flash, she brought it up and aimed a blow of her own for his side. Quickly, Dangerous twisted around and their swords struck together with a clang. Dangerous thrust his weight into the rapier, exploiting his main advantage over her, strength. Amira knocked off balance, but she regained it and spun around in a tight circle. Turning her back to her opponent had always been discouraged, but Amira used the momentum of her spin to swing a blow that narrowly missed smacking Dangerous' torso. After the swing, she couldn't stop her spin right away, and had to give ground to return strike. Dangerous was a worthy adversary, even if he lacked the savagery that had been trained into her. He fought differently as himself than as the demon. Ka'is was like a thing born with teeth and talons. Dangerous fought with more pauses, like he considered his moves before he made them. The pair exchanged another flurry of blows, then another. Amira held her own ground easily enough, but Dangerous blocked her with more skill than she'd expected. He had an opening when she tripped on her skirt, but, being a gentleman, didn't exploit it. She almost yelled at him for that. She didn't need his chivalrous follies, but held her tongue. The best lesson was to beat him and prove he'd made a mistake. Since she didn't know his weaknesses in sword fighting, she needed to play against his strength, Amira struck for his cheek, forcing him back. He brought his rapier up, and their blades clashed. Her heart beat a sharp tempo. Her breath came in quick gasps. Caught up in the match, she hadn't realized how much effort she was expending. Sweat stung her eyes, and she smeared her sleeve across her face, keeping the archduke in her line of sight. Across from her, a purple vein throbbed in Dangerth's temple, and the rhythm of his breathing matched hers. "You're good," he muttered as they broke apart. Amira inhaled a gulp of air. "You expected different." "Fair point." They circled one another. Amira watched for the first sign Dangerth was about to pounce. She drew a breath before striking. That was her mistake. Dangerth swung first. Amira was forced to skirt backwards to avoid his blade before she could retaliate. Feinting to one side, Amira swung from the elbow, arching the sword on a path for the archduke's shoulder. He moved to block, but at the last second, Amira sprang toward him, ducking under the path of his blade. His rapier passed so close she felt it slice through the air above her head. Not wasting a second, she flicked her wrist, and with a single clean motion, her blade smacked the back of Dangerth's hand. It was barely a touch, but the dull blade hit with a snap. His grip faltered. Following up her advantage, Amira brought her weapon around and slammed it into his. With his weakened grip, the blade knocked out of his hand. Amira kicked Dangerth's rapier away the moment it clanged to the ground. "Well," Dangerth said, "looks like you've won." Amira kicked his shin, battering her weight against his. Dangerth was caught off guard as she seized his collar and yanked him sideways, then shoved and sent them both tumbling to the ground. She slammed him into the cobblestones. Her skirt spread around them in a tangled pool of silk as she pressed the dull edge of her rapier beneath his chin. "You're dead, Your Highness." Dangerth winced, not bothering to put up a fight. "So I am." He blinked slowly. She had been careful not to let his head hit the stones, but he still seemed a little dazed. "You rely too much on physical power. Remember, a viper can kill a bull. Your strength will not always save you," Amira said. "Even when you've broken apart from your opponent, you can't let your guard down." Dangerth frowned. "And even when you think you're safe, never stop watching. Never take your eyes off anything that could hide a foe, especially the shadows." Her fingers knotted into his shirt, and she realized her face was mere inches from his. "You need to learn to protect yourself. Your best chance of safety is if you are your own bodyguard." "Amira, are you teaching me to fight?" "I'm teaching you to survive." The answer came instantly, rolling off her tongue like the most natural thing in the world. Dangerth swallowed, though not out of fear. There was quite a different emotion in those deep brown eyes. "Have you ever thought that if I can't be free of Ka'is?" Amira gripped his collar tighter. Darrigan's words echoed in her mind, and she could see where this conversation was headed. "Ka'is doesn't change that the world needs you, Dangerth." "You think the world needs me?" The question hung between them like an invisible cord. Amira hesitated. "Yes," she whispered, that one word grating against her throat like sand. "Yes, Dangerth. The world needs you." Dangerth's eyes widened. "Why?" The question was barely audible. "You're good. You're kind. And you're willing to suffer to stay that way." Amira lowered her rapier but kept her hold on his shirt. Dangerth's brow furrowed. His mouth opened as if to speak, but he shook his head. "You're a good man," Amira whispered. "You will be a great emperor. I know it." Dangerth didn't speak. He reached up, and Amira thought he might be resuming their sparring match, but his fingers traced the side of her brow, down her cheek. Amira's breath caught, and her heart started racing again, but she didn't move. Dangerous stroked the loose strands of hair back from her face. Then his fingers found her messy braid and tangled in her plait, almost experimentally. Amira thought her heart might hammer through her ribs. Heat pounded through her in waves. She liked him touching her. Far too much. She couldn't have pulled away if she wanted to. He touched her reverently, as though he feared he was unworthy, as though the honor floored him. Before she quite knew what was happening, Dangerous was tugging her toward him. He was gentle, ever so gentle, as he brought her face to his. Amira's eyes fluttered closed the moment their lips touched. All questions and doubts fled, and all that remained was his kiss. Dangerous's mouth moved gently against hers, tender and soft. She let him tug her even closer, their bodies melding into each other. Amira's heart hammered in her chest, and she was acutely aware of everything. The smell of him, the taste of him, the warmth of him. The archduke's arm coiled around her waist, holding her tightly as though he worried she might fly away. Amira tossed away the dull rapier and fondled his face in her hands. He deepened their kiss, and her breath quickened. Shivers of excitement rippled through her, excitement that sparked something hungry in the pit of her stomach. Amira's hands wandered from his face and slid down his neck. Almost of their own accord, her fingers hooked under his collar. She wanted to unbutton Dangerous's shirt so she could touch his chest. She wanted to touch him everywhere. But suddenly he broke away. Dangerous pushed her off, disentangling himself and scrambling to his feet. He took 3 giant steps, and Amira thought he was going to run and leave her there on the ground. But he jerked to a halt with his back to her. "Forgive me," he panted, hands clenched at his sides. "That was inappropriate. I shouldn't have done that. It won't happen again." Amira very much wanted that to happen again, especially since they were supposed to be married soon, but stopped herself from saying that out loud. Clearing her throat, she rose to her feet and straightened her skirts. Dangerous glanced to her, but Amira doubted she could look at him without wanting to kiss him again. Kissing him had been incredible. It had been nothing like she had imagined it would be, certainly nothing like kissing Corman. It made her wonder about other things no proper lady should be thinking about, and if they could be just as amazing with him. When Dangerous spoke, his voice nearly cracked. "Amira, I truly am sorry." "I know." The assassin covered her embarrassment and sense of loss with a caustic grimace. "That was too forward." "We aren't married yet." Dangerous looked away. "And even after." Amira looked up. There was a part of her, at least a part, that had been looking forward to her wedding night. A part of her that now writhed and growled in protest. "What do you mean?" Dangerous's expression turned grave. "The demon, Amira." "What about him?" The archduke looked away. "He sees everything. Even when I'm with you and I can't feel him, he's there." "I know. So what?" Amira folded her arms across her chest. "Everything we do together, he will know. Everything." His words sank in and Amira's cheeks colored. "Oh." "Yes." Sorrow lined Dangerous's face. "I don't want to share you, Amira. Not with anyone, but certainly not him." Amira's eyes stung, and she couldn't quite say why. "I see." "I'm sorry," Dangerous said. "I should have told you sooner, but I didn't know how." Amira shook her head. "You said the Empire needs heirs. You said that was why you needed a wife." This time, Dangerous's cheeks colored, and he ran a hand through his hair.
It does. But things are different now. He looked away. I thought I'd learned to control Ka'is enough that I could do that. But then I lost control that night we met. He turned back to her. I haven't completely lost control in a long time.
Amira frowned, piecing his words together. You don't want to share me. And you're afraid you'd lose control if we made love? Her voice went hoarse, but she managed to force out the last few words, embarrassment and a tinge of excitement weighing her voice.
Yes, Dangerous said. When I agreed to marry your sister, I'd kept Ka'is under control for years, and I was sure I could still do what I needed to do. At least enough times to conceive an heir, but... He coughed.
But I suppressed the demon, Amira protested, taking a step toward him. If it would be safe with anyone, it would be me.
I'm afraid. Dangerous almost shouted it. My father lost control 2 weeks after returning from the north. He said, my governess tried to keep me out, but I got in to see my mother 2 days later. His eyes watered. Amira, I barely recognized her past the bruises and swelling. She was pregnant at the time, and she lost the baby.
Dane. She reached for him, but he pulled away.
You unravel me, Amira.
Dangerous said.
Don't think I don't want you because I do.
He turned partly away from her, eyes squeezed shut, hands clenched at his sides.
Gods, I thought I knew lust before I met you, but it was nothing like this.
Amira's heart beat faster. He still wouldn't look at her, but his words sent an ache and a heat through her that she thought might drive her mad. This wasn't pain, but it was torture. Torture like she'd never known possible.
It's every fantasy I have of you.
His tone implied that there had been quite a few.
I end up seeing you like my mother after my father lost control. I see you beaten and bloody and broken, and I'm afraid, terrified.
He looked back to her and there were tears in his eyes.
I'd rather die,
he said, his voice cracking.
Even if it seems he's locked away, so long as he's inside me, I won't allow us to be that vulnerable.
Something inside Amira crumpled and curled into a dark corner of her heart. I see.
I'm sorry.
But you still asked me to marry you just now, Amira said flatly.
I don't know what else to do at this point.
Amira inhaled a long breath. She was angry. She couldn't deny that. The words rose in her. She could accuse him of toying with her, of taunting her with what she couldn't have. But she didn't. In a strange way, it seemed unfair. She didn't understand him, not fully. But she did understand living in fear of a curse. You're a good man, Dangerous. Amira wanted to tell him that she wasn't afraid, that she had plenty of her own fantasies she wanted to play out in his bed. Or hers, either was fine. But seeing his bent shoulders and how the memory of his mother still brought tears to his eyes, she didn't press him. Maybe he was right. Maybe it was too dangerous for them to be lovers. She needed to think about this when she had a clearer head. Amira set to gathering their practice rapiers with militant focus. Dangerous let the silence stretch between them. As uncomfortable as it was not nearly as painful as speaking. Amira never had much hope for marriage, much less something like affection or desire. Her father had made it clear he would never part with her willingly. But with Dangerous, she only now realized that she had allowed herself to hope for something. A life that was more than obedience and violence and suffering for the sake of the greater good. All that hope was crushed now. Disappointment weighed down on her like a ton of bricks. The sting behind her eyes became sharper. She scrubbed at them. What was happening to her? Since when had she wanted Daindrith badly enough to cry over him?
"Are you all right?" Daindrith asked. "Do you want to talk about it?"
"I'm fine." Amira turned her head away.
"I will still see you cared for and protected, Amira, and I would still like for us to be friends. I don't want this to change things between us."
Friends? Amira almost scoffed at that. She'd had friends before, not many, but she'd never wanted to take their shirts off. Daindrith had given her just a taste of something more, and she wanted it. Amira nodded. "As you wish, Your Highness." Daindrith let out a long, defeated breath. Amira had a feeling he blamed himself for kissing her. It didn't matter now. That kiss had made her want something, believe she could have something, and now that hope was torn away. The sting of rejection pricked that scarred place in her heart where her father's apathy and her stepmother's cruelty had worn it raw for all those years. For just a moment, Daindrith had gotten behind the hardened exterior, and now a new scar was forming where his rejection had struck. She wondered how many more wounds her heart could take before it became all scars and calluses. How long before she didn't have one left at all? The quiet stretched between them like a taut cord. Not a word was spoken as Daindrith helped her return the rapiers and escorted her back in the direction of her apartment, dodging the stares of the guards. Thaddred joined them, returning from the direction of the art galleries. He kept glancing between the two, noticing the stony silence. Despite Daindrith's wish for nothing to change, something had. Her lips still tingled from his kiss. The taste of him still lingered on her tongue. The urgency of his embrace still warmed her body with hot tingles. Everything was different now. Daindrith halted in the entryway, while Amira marched into the apartment. She headed for the boudoir, though she didn't need anything there. She wanted to be as far from the archduke as possible. Perhaps, if she were no longer tantalized by his presence, she could get her head on straight and return to her senses.
"I'm dining with the empress again tonight," Daindrith said. "She wanted to see me alone."
Amira halted at the door to her bedchamber, hand resting on the knob. "You may come here after if you need my help," she said. She wasn't going to deny him solace from Ka'is. The archduke groaned ever so quietly. "That's not what I meant, Amira. I mean I will probably not see you until tomorrow." "Understood?" Amira said. He didn't move. She could feel his eyes on her, fixed like constellations.
"Are you offended?"
"No." "Hold me again."
"I truly am sorry."
"I know." "There is nothing to forgive."
"I should go."
"You should. Don't leave me." The archduke's boots scuffed against the floor as he turned to go. Thaddred followed, and their footsteps left together, the knight's 3-beat stride after the archduke's steady footfalls. Amira listened intently as they faded down the corridor. Feeling like each one of the archduke's departing steps was the strike of a hammer driving a nail through her chest. Amira stayed as she was long after the door closed, wishing more than anything he would come back.